On this Sunday night, Joe Biden sets the tone for his administration. The transition of power in the White House.
Let's give each other a chance.
As Donald Trump kicks off a legal battle, refusing to budge. The impact of the incoming president on Canada's energy sector.
This is Jeopardy!
And Alex Trebek, the Canadian host of Jeopardy, loses his fight with cancer.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Joe Biden is setting out to build bridges in a divided America. But the president-elect has a lot of work ahead of him to win over the more than 70 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump. With Kamala Harris working alongside him, Biden has the monumental task of tackling the worsening COVID-19 pandemic, which the Trump administration has been accused of mishandling. We begin tonight with Mike Armstrong on a country in transition.
The president-elect started his day attending church with his daughter and grandson, the morning after delivering the biggest speech of his life. Joe Biden's victory speech made it clear one of the first things he wants to do is turn down the heat.
Let's give each other a chance.
Biden is calling for an era of openness and respect.
It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again.
This was a night where Biden claimed victory with pride, but without boasting. Instead, repeating a campaign promise to govern for all Americans, including those who didn't vote for him.
Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now.
Thank you. Good evening.
For the vice president-elect, a part of the focus was on what the election meant. How it reinforced the United States as a country of possibilities, one where the daughter of an Indian immigrant can be elected vice president.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
Now, it may have taken days before the election was called for Biden and Harris, but the celebrating will be short. As of Monday, they're set to start tackling what will be the biggest challenge once they take over, the pandemic. According to reports, the first order of business comes Monday. The transition team is set to name a 12-member coronavirus task force. This country is hitting new records daily. They've averaged more than 100,000 new cases a day for a week. They've had more than 120,000 new cases for 3 days running. Now, new cases are one thing, but there are now predictions the number of hospitalizations is about to explode. Robin?
Our Mike Armstrong in Philadelphia tonight. Thanks, Mike. The sitting U.S. President, Donald Trump, has not conceded this election. Today, he made more claims in tweets about the election being stolen from him. Then he hit the golf course while his legal team is working on preventing him from being a one-and-done president. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
As Americans celebrate President-elect Joe Biden's win outside the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump played golf for a second day. Behind the scenes, Trump and his campaign have launched an all-out war to reverse the ballot counts.
It was time for the president to turn this discussion over to his lawyers, time for the lawyers to make the case that they have, both in court and to the American people, and then we're going to have to deal with those facts as they're presented.
The president has repeatedly made claims of widespread voter fraud without any evidence, launching this election defense site to raise money for his legal fight. The campaign is also asking supporters to take to the streets in protest.
I'm upset about these votes. I know there's a bunch of voter fraud going on, and I think people need to step up, and I think it needs to be a fair election.
The president sent out a barrage of tweets Sunday, one saying, "We believe these people are thieves. The big city machines are corrupt. This was a stolen election." Some Republican leaders aren't buying it.
When you say that the election was corrupt or stolen or rigged, that's unfortunately rhetoric that gets picked up by authoritarians around the world. And I think it also discourages confidence in our democratic process here at home.
But America's top two Republicans, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, are refusing to criticize the president's inflammatory words.
You're going to have contests, you're going to have court decisions. That's how we settle these kinds of disputes in this country.
Judges in several states will hear arguments from Trump campaign lawyers starting Monday. And that includes a case filed with the U.S. Supreme Court. But most legal experts say these lawsuits are a long shot in changing the outcome of the election. Robin?
Jennifer Johnson in Washington. Thanks, Jen. Canada-U.S. relations will no doubt be different from the last 4 years. Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau may have more in common politically, but there are differences when it comes to policy. As Abigail Bimman reports, they may not see eye to eye on protectionism and energy.
Tonight, the whole world is watching America.
Joe Biden has made it clear he's a proponent of protectionism, a buy American man. The Canadian government has a plan for that.
Making sure that this space, the North American space, that we start talking about buying North America.
In an interview on the West Block with Mercedes Stephenson, Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne said Canada will work to foster cooperation, focused on the COVID-19 response, the economy, and climate change.
Biden is going to be a green president, so I don't know what happens in the energy industry.
At issue, the future of the Keystone XL pipeline, a project worth billions to transport up to 830,000 barrels of oil a day from Alberta to Nebraska, then connecting on to the U.S. Gulf Coast.
I've been against Keystone from the beginning. It is tar sands that we don't need.
Ottawa and Alberta will keep pushing in the face of Biden's promise to quash it.
We'll certainly make the case that Canada has been and remains the most trusted energy supplier to the United States, that we will want to work with them, that we have a price on carbon. We're going to zero neutral by 2050.
In a statement after Biden's win, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was blunt. U.S. energy security is dependent on Alberta. Much of the American economy is fueled by Alberta energy.
There may be room for compromise on that. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It'll certainly test the skills of both the Alberta and federal governments.
We should work together on cleaner air, cleaner water, and cleaner traditional energies. I think we need a broader discussion on the United States joining the Paris Accord, energy, and the environment.
Former Manitoba Premier and Canadian Ambassador to the U.S., Gary Dewar, points out Biden's journey to the White House was boosted by the construction trades in states he was able to flip right across the Canadian border. And building trades have a lot of jobs invested in that pipeline. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Every U.S. election is watched closely around the world. A Joe Biden presidency could mark a significant shift in geopolitics. Tonight, Redmond Shannon takes a look at how the result is being received around the globe.
Not a protest, but a celebration in the ancestral Indian village of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris.
I knew she was going to win. So I was not tense, except I wanted the final results to come in so that I can go and sleep.
After several days of uncertainty, Joe Biden emerges victorious as the 46th president-elect.
Polls suggested a preference for the Biden-Harris ticket across much of the world, particularly in Europe.
US-Präsident Biden und sein Vize Harris.
Where there's a feeling among some that Biden had one undeniable quality.
He was an uninspiring candidate, but his biggest inspiration was he wasn't Donald Trump.
Among the world's leaders tweeting their congratulations to Joe Biden is British Prime Minister and friend and ally of Donald Trump, Boris Johnson. The outgoing US president has been a big fan of Brexit, and Johnson had been pinning his hopes on Trump's promise of a post-Brexit free trade agreement.
But Biden, an Irish American, has insisted there will be no free trade deal if Brexit results in the return of a hard border in Ireland. Period.
We've even said that we would never put any infrastructure at the border between the north and the south. And of course, if the EU do the same, this issue is resolved.
The Biden presidency may change the dynamics of the UK-EU negotiations that are coming to a head this month.
I am confident a deal can still be done.
Another friend of Trump's is Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, partly because Trump moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and withdrew the US from the Iran nuclear deal. Netanyahu called Biden a friend of Israel Sunday, despite a promise from Biden that he will bring the US back into the deal. In a tweet, Iran's foreign minister encouraged Biden and Harris to abandon the disastrous, lawless bullying of the outgoing regime. Washington's other greatest adversaries, Russia and China, have yet to formally acknowledge Biden's win. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Now to the pandemic. It's hard to hear the numbers, but the reality is that cases are spiking across Canada. For a second straight day, Ontario reported another record high, more than 1,300 new cases in just 24 hours and 13 more deaths. There are nearly 1,400 cases in Quebec, the province's highest daily total. Manitoba has more than 400 new cases. Saskatchewan has a daily high of 159 new cases, and Alberta has 727. Tonight, Manitoba's health minister is calling for an investigation into 2 long-term care homes dealing with outbreaks. One is the Maples long-term care home, where 22 people have died since a COVID-19 outbreak was declared less than a week ago. 7 people have died at the care home in the last 48 hours. Paramedics were called in to treat a dozen people on Friday night, but at least 2 people died before they got there.
There are a lot of people undertaking to understand more what occurred at Maples, what changed so very quickly that it was necessary to call paramedics. We're being told by those on site that they're seeing things in terms of the condition of patients that they've never seen before in their careers.
The health minister is now calling for a task force specific to long-term care homes. A rapid response team is on site, and 20 Red Cross personnel are being deployed to the home. Coming up, he died, but they voted him in anyway. We'll explain when Global National continues. Well, there's an interesting election result in North Dakota. David Andal, a popular Republican candidate, has been elected to the state legislature. But the 55-year-old died of COVID-19 weeks ago. Heather Yerkes-West explains.
Politically, North Dakota is as red as it comes. Republican support in these parts is a given.
It's just the loyalty, party loyalty.
So it comes as little surprise that voters in North Dakota voted overwhelmingly Tuesday to elect a Republican candidate, even though he was dead.
Well, in District 8 here, unfortunately, one of the candidates died, and he died after the ballot had been printed, so his name could not be removed from the ballot.
55-year-old rancher David Andal died of COVID-19 on October 5th. He was very cautious, especially because he did have a few health challenges, but he was unable to fend off this disease, his family wrote in a Facebook post.
COVID-19 activity is surging in this state. North Dakota has a population of a little more than 750,000 people, and yet it's seeing more than 1,500 new infections every day.
It's scary, in my opinion. I don't get out too much. Being retired, I can stay home, walk the dog.
North Dakota has the highest case count per capita in the country, but there are no mandated restrictions and no statewide requirements to wear masks. Andal's death leaves a vacancy in North Dakota's newly elected House.
We haven't experienced that situation before in our recollection, so it obviously created a question. How do they proceed?
Bjornson says it's likely the state's Republican committee will be able to appoint a new candidate to take Andal's seat. Yet another situation without precedent in an election unlike anything this country has ever seen. Heather Yerkes-West, Global News, Bismarck, North Dakota.
Still ahead, the stories from survivors and the Canadians who saved them.
You're watching Global National.
In 1945, Canada helped free the Netherlands from Nazi occupation. Now, a new documentary called 75 Years Later, The Sounds of Freedom shows how that liberation developed into a deep bond between the two countries. Dutch survivors living in Canada and Canadian veterans reflect on the horrors and heroism they witnessed. Camp Westerbork has a dark history. It was run by the Nazis during the Second World War, a detention center for 100,000 people, mostly Jews, who were put on the trains and deported to the concentration camps.
Across the street from us, there was a Jewish family. They had a little shop there, and one morning you wake up and there's a big seal on the door, so you know they've gone. And in the beginning, of course, you didn't know anything about the gas chambers in concentration camps. You just knew that they were sent to a camp, you know.
A spirit of wild fiesta reigns in towns and villages freed by the Canadian Drive.
Survivors only learned the true scope of what the Nazis had done after the liberation of the Netherlands. But the Nazis were desperate to destroy the evidence.
The Germans were so busy, they were burning things, papers burning and everything. There were all everywhere little fires. And the Germans disappeared.
In April 1945, Canadian soldiers came in and saved those who were still at Camp Westerbork. It was difficult to witness the hunger and desperation.
When you see people that are starving, that have no source of sustenance, even to the point of where they eat tulip bulbs, that is something that when you experience it, you never forget it.
Veteran Charles Goodman returned decades later on the 70th anniversary of the liberation.
This Dutchman rushed over and clasped me and kissed me on each cheek, and he was crying. And he said he was 4 years old when he and his father and his mother were put into that camp, and we saved their lives.
But Canadian soldiers lost their lives fighting for freedom in the Netherlands. They were buried there, and their graves are still cared for. Dutch survivors who immigrated to Canada make a point of returning and visiting the rows upon rows.
To see these endless rows of graves and, stones or crosses with the names of Canadian soldiers, and these young boys were 22 to 25 years old. And to think that they had come to liberate us.
Today, Camp Westerbork is a commemoration center to remind the world of the atrocities. The rail lines, however, have been destroyed so that no trains can ever follow that route again. Up next, who is Alex Trebek? Remembering the Canadian game show host who changed the face of television. Canadian hockey legend and broadcaster Howie Meeker has died. After signing on to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1940s, Meeker helped the team win 4 NHL championships. He retired from hockey in 1969 but became a broadcaster for Hockey Night in Canada. Meeker was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame and received the Order of Canada. He was 97. It's hard to categorize the loss of Alex Trebek. For close to 40 years, the Canadian hosted a quiz show with obscure facts. And today, he lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. Here's Mike Drolet with a look back at Trebek's career.
This is Jeopardy!
For over 3 decades, that familiar jingle meant only one person would walk out onto the Jeopardy stage.
Here is the host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek!
The Sudbury, Ontario native was the no-nonsense host that turned a popular game show into a ratings powerhouse.
Good luck, here we go.
And while Alex Trebek became one of the most beloved hosts in U.S. television history, he never forgot where he came from, insisting on at least one question every show that referenced Canada, oftentimes to the detriment of the American contestants.
Residents of this Saskatchewan city are called Moose Javians. Randy?
What is Winnipeg?
No. What is Moose Jaw?
He launched his career on Canadian television in the 1960s. There was never a question he would be a game show host.
Cheer up, Gene. It's only another 18.
I'm cheered!
It was which show would catapult him to stardom. In 1984, he shot the pilot for Jeopardy! Unlike other fare on TV at the time, it was a show that made the audience think. And while his dry wit and unflappable persona made him an easy target to parody,
state your name. In that category, all you need to do is state your name.
Nobody had more fun poking fun at Alex Trebek.
There were women here in Jeopardy!
Than Alex Trebek. He had more than 40 screen credits in his career, all of them playing some version of himself.
You bet it all. Cliff, why would you do something like that?
Still, he rarely showed his true personality on screen, yet he was also very open about his struggles in life, including his final one.
I have some news to share with all of you.
When he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he wanted to be the one to inform his fans, vowing to fight in that very Alex Trebek way.
Truth told, I have to, because under the terms of my contract, I have to host Jeopardy for 3 more years.
He was 80 years old when the cancer finally beat him. He taped his last show only a week and a half ago, but many of his Canadian fans will remember this as his last appearance on TV.
The correct response? Who is Tim Stutzel?
His legacy will always be tied to Jeopardy, the answer to who he was in the form of a question. Who was the incomparable Alex Trebek? Mike Drolet, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with some moments from Jeopardy as we all remember Alex Trebek. Good night.
Any family members back home cheering you on?
You know, here's a true story, man. I learned English because of you. And so my grandfather, who raised me, I'm going to get tears right now. I used to sit on his lap and watch you every day.
Did you come up with the right one? No? What is we love you out? That's very kind of you. Thank you. Cost you $19.95.